Welcome to this 88K model railroad video. And today we're going to be looking at DCC-EX and its DC mode. Now DC mode allows the command station to operate like a DC transformer. It uses pulse code modulation or pulse width modulation. It sends that voltage across the track in pulses, and that's how it controls the speed. Now the problem I have is, or I had with Rocrail, is Rocrail could power the track off, but it could not power the track back on. So in this video, it's a field fix. We're going to go through, identify the problem, and then go through the fix action. So let's get started. Okay, before we go any further, let me frame things up. I went through in my fault isolation, I did connect or set the system up as DCC using Rocrail. And with DCC, I could cut on and cut off the track power. The issue is only with the DC mode. And basically what happened is, if you were to connect the or click the power on button, the LED on the track side of the command station would not power on. But if you were to go to another device, cut track power on, and if you connected the power off button, then the track would power off, but it would never power back on. So with that said, let's go and look at the test configuration that I had. Here's the basic diagram for my test setup. I had the command station connected via Wi-Fi to the web throttle and the DCC-EX cab and the computer. They were all connected to the Wi-Fi. I would initiate the commands on and off from all three devices. The only device that failed on the on command was Rocrail. So that way I knew that the issue is isolated through to Rocrail and the command station. So that led me to the next process, or the next step of identifying what the problem was. Okay, so on this slide, I pretty much just kind of laid out what I was doing. I identified the problem, created a solution, compiled the firmware, then I applied the firmware, and I did the test. So in the identifying the problem, what I end up using is Wireshark, and I started sniffing on the Ethernet connection, and I issued the command via Rocrail. The greater than sign 1 space main, and the less than sign 1 then space main, and then the greater than sign is what Rocrail transmits out, and that is a valid command. The way that the commands work is they have what they call opcodes, and the opcode is that very first digit that comes in, and it sets up what type of command it is. So if you look here in the list, it's a partial list that I've got up. 0 is the track power. Then the next, you'll have another parameter there, or sometimes a couple of parameters that will tell the system specifics. So for example, in this particular command, you have 3 parameters: the main, the program, and join. And you will find those values in the message. In this case, its main is what it transmitted out. Now with DCC or DC mode, it's not an issue of main, but it's a track. It's either A or B, whichever one of the track positions that you're going to send the DCC pulse width modulation over, which I think is part of the problem. The system, after the TCP message is received by the command station will parse out that message, and then process it. So let's look at that. So I have that process basically laid out in the identify the problem. You can see in this first step, it's Rocrail initiating the command, then the command is sent over the TCP, then the DCC-EX parses that information out. The next step that it uses, or it goes through what is called a keyword hash. It takes that main word and convert it into an integer, which makes it easier for it to look up. Now, the issue that we have is that command is not being processed via DCC-EX. And I believe it's because DCC-EX, when it's in the DC mode, it's using a different kernel or coding. So to work around that, instead of having Rocrail to go in and change what they're putting out for DC, I doubt if that's going to happen because it's not something that's of a basic convention. So the easiest thing to do is to use what they call a command filter. And that's why, like I said, it's so good, or that's what's great about DCC-EX, is that you have control over the firmware. The command that you use, it's command filter, but it's specifically called stealth global. And what it does is it allows you to break down the packet that's coming in, extract the information, and either change it or modify it or insert your own message or command. And in this case, we're using the track manager command, and it's setting track power, and it's just setting it on all tracks, and then have it to power on. This eliminates the main command, or I shouldn't say eliminates. What it does is it replaces the main command. If you look at the code that I put, or the code here at the bottom, you can see where it takes the integer and it goes and automatically identifies it. That's that auto ROC underscore WA, and that ROC underscore WA is just what I'm calling the a Rocrail workaround. It takes that value, and that the hash keyword changes main into 11339. This is a new value that the system will look up. But if you look into the coding itself, it says that 11339 is an error. So if you inject this new command in, it will process that command. Then you see where it says if one return, and it has the opcode equals 1, then it's just going to continue on. So, but instead of just taking everything out, I just inserted this command to just let it continue on. So once I built this particular, or I inserted this command in the myautomation.h, I then went into the DCC-EX installer. I started that whole process, and it will ask you, do you want to insert your own configuration file? And then that's where you insert your, you tell it yes, and then show where the directory, where it's located in the directory. And then you continue on, you hit load, it will compile it, and then you'll have your modifications in the firmware. Then after that, I just went through, I tested it, and every one of the modules could initiate the on and off power command. So that pretty much resolved that issue, and I could get my power on and my LED to go high. So if you guys have a problem, or I shouldn't say that, if you guys want to use Rocrail, and then you also want to be able to control power on and off on the track via Rocrail, then you can put this little workaround in. There may be a better way of doing it, but I could not see anyone complaining about this particular issue or what. But at least it works, and it gives you a little bit of kind of insight, or yeah, a little insight to the inner workings of not Rockwell, of DCC-EX. So if you do get into a problem, at least you have an idea of how to handle it. So with that said, hopefully you guys can use this. And as usual, like, subscribe, and we'll talk to you guys later.